Morning, Renz.
Good morning, Mr. Hune.
How are you today?
Doing quite well.
This is going to be your worksheet for today. If you sit down and get started on warm-up exercise, it'd be great.
Alright, cool.
Loser. So before we get into today's lesson and address the warm-up, we're going to review yesterday. Who can give me a definition of evolution? That's close. The actual definition is evolution is populations changing through time due to natural selection. Who can remember one of the 4 parts necessary for natural selection? Rance, give me one part.
Heredity.
Heredity. The ability to pass on traits due to genetics is very important. Anyone else got another one? George?
Variation in traits?
Variation in traits. This is true. Without variation in traits, no trait would be able to give an advantage and allow evolution to occur. Any more? Anyone else come up with any more? Christine?
Differing reproduction rates?
Differing reproduction rates. This is true. If one species happens to have a more advantageous trait, that means it'll be able to reproduce more. Anyone think of the last one? No? The last one is that advantageous traits in the offspring allow them to survive to reproduce themselves. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Alright, let's move on. So everyone did the warm-up, I'm assuming? Yeah, maybe. Well, even if you did, who can tell me what these belong to? Fred?
Those elk antlers?
Elk antlers, correct, man. Anyone tell me why elk have antlers? George?
For self-defense?
Self-defense, right. Self-defense is an advantageous trait. It allowed this elk to get ahead and its offspring to reproduce more. And that's why elk have antlers now, because it was a worthy trait to have. What other traits do elk have? Anyone? Yeah.
They have fur?
They have fur, right. What other animals have fur?
Bears.
Bears, right. As you can see in this tree I've made, this is the elk that we've all been talking about. And this is red deer from Eurasia. Who can tell me some similarities between them?
They both have antlers.
They both have antlers. Correct. This is because they're very closely related. And will bring us to our next topic. Alright, so today we're covering classification of organisms. Who can define classification for me? Renz.
Classification, wouldn't that be how you group things together and see similarities between different things?
Yeah, classification is just a way of grouping things based on similarities, or not grouping things based on differences. Classification is important in many aspects of human life and understanding, such as this school. We are located on 13th and Ord Street in the town of Laramie, in Albany County, the state of Wyoming, the country of the United States, on the North American continent, on the planet Earth, etc., etc. We group things. This is an example of hierarchy of groups, where there's more specific groups that fit into more broad groups, such as the town of Laramie into the county Albany County, or Albany County into the state of Wyoming. These types of classifications can be used in many fields. In chemistry, for example, we organize smaller units of matter into larger units of matter, such as electrons, protons, neutrons being subatomic particles. And those particles making up an atom, atoms making up elements, and elements making up matter. So our objectives today are for you all to be able to understand how organisms are classified into taxonomical groups. I want you to be able to write in binomial nomenclature, be able to distinguish groups based on similarities in certain evolutionary traits, and also to know the 7 levels of hierarchy in taxonomy. So, how do we even begin to organize organisms into groups? Life on the planet is very diverse. The last number I saw was there's an estimated 8.7 million species on the planet Earth. Of those, we've only described and named about 1.2 million, leaving many more to be discovered. First, we're going to talk about Linnaean taxonomy. Taxonomy is to name and classify organisms. In 1735, Carl Linnaeus, botanist, set out to bring order to the diversity of organisms found on Earth. He did this by naming them based on physical similarities and using a hierarchy of taxonomical groups. So first we're going to talk about how Linnaeus described organisms. And he did this by creating something called binomial nomenclature. Binomial nomenclature is a 2-part name unique to each species. The first part of the name is the genus or genre, and this is closely related species that probably broke off very recently. The second part of the name is the actual species itself, the individual population that has unique characteristics and can interbreed amongst itself, producing viable offspring. Some examples of species are elk, wolves, tigers, lions, right? These are the common names. However, people sometimes get confused with species due to things like mules, a cross between a donkey and a horse, or a liger, a cross between a lion and a tiger. Though a lion and a tiger can have offspring, the offspring itself cannot reproduce, meaning that it's not a species by definition. The way Linnaeus named species with the genus and then the species name involved scientific names as well. Some rules on writing these. Whenever you're writing the genus species name, always have it italicized. If you're writing it by hand, make sure to underline the name so we know you're talking about a species. All of the names of the genus, phylum, family, kingdom, order, species, they're all based in Latin and Greek words. And if they're not based on Latin and Greek words, we Latinize them. For example, human beings, common name, are called Homo sapiens, from the genus Homo and the species Sapiens. We're actually the only genus Homos around anymore because there's been extinctions involved in our genus. When writing names, make sure to always capitalize the genus, such as Neotamius umbrinus, which is the Uinta chipmunk. The Neotamius would be uppercase because it's the genus, and umbrinus would be lowercase because it's the species. Once you've written out a genus species name in full on a report, you can abbreviate by writing the first letter of the genus with a period and the species name after. Organisms are organized in taxonomic levels. These are also called the hierarchy of taxonomy. The groups from least specific to most specific are kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Once you get familiar, these terms become second nature to you. However, I know it's hard to memorize 7 new terms all at once, so I recommend coming up with an acronym to help you remember. My favorite is King Philip came over from Great Spain. The essence of classification is that lower level taxa are nested within higher levels of taxa. Definition of taxa, by the way, is any group of organisms at any level of the classification system. It can be Cervus elephas, the deer, even-toed ungulates, mammals, primates, all considered taxa. Lower levels fit into higher levels due to evolutionary traits that are similar. Anyways, the worksheet I gave you at the beginning of class has 2 activities I want you to complete in groups of 2. The first is to come up with your own acronym for the 7 levels of taxonomy. The next is to make a hierarchy of different species on a chart, such as the one I supplied with you today when you walked in. I want you to pick a species and then work your way up through the 7 levels of taxonomy, finding example species in each that you haven't used yet, and a trait that that group has in common. For example, I chose the species of elk, which is Cervus canadensis. Next, I chose the genus of Cervus. My example is the red deer, the Cervus elephas. The genus trait of elk and the red deer is they're all mainly in Eurasia, contain antlers, and shed them once a year. Next I went to family, and etc., and etc., and etc. In a group, get a computer and find a web resource that you can find all these levels of taxonomy for the species you choose. It's alright if you want to use Wikipedia because it actually has very good links to each of these. I'd like you to turn this activity in by the end of class. Alright class, listen up. Before you all leave, I want to do a quick review of today's lesson. Each kingdom has smaller and smaller groups that are determined by more specific shared traits. Carl Linnaeus set the standard binomial nomenclature used today and was the first one to tackle classifying organisms. There are 7 distinct taxonomical groups that follow a hierarchy. There's no homework tonight, but I want you to think about the last question I have posted here on the board. If you just write it down in a notebook, take it home, come up with an answer for me tomorrow. Have a great day.